This demonstration of alcohol ink painting has a Parisian subject, a small fountain in a park on Ile de la Cité. Here is our reference photo. Notice the strong pattern of lights and darks, as well as the interesting detail on the fountain and on the grate below. As usual, we'll begin with a detailed drawing and start by masking the areas that need to stay white. We'll notice there are not very many of those. After the first layer of masking has dried, we'll use a technique where we'll actually put down a pale layer of color and mask over it. You'll see that I've selected several pale shades, mushroom, pebble, and cool perry to serve as the light areas of the metal grate. I'll do the same with the fountain. In both cases, I'll use the cotton ball for texture. After the ink is dry, I'll mask over it. A frequently asked question is, can you do that? And the answer is yes, but only if you don't mind losing a bit of ink to the masking fluid. This was a fairly heavy layer of masking fluid, so it took a while to dry. Here's where we are at this point, and here's where we're going. The next step is to put on our ink layer, and you will note the great care and precision in which I apply the ink. In choosing colors, I'm guided by the reference photo, and my first subject is the dark shadows of the grate. Remembering that I masked off the light areas, so I'm going to let the darks just naturally fall in. My go-to darks are espresso and eggplant, and I'll use them in the shadows of the foliage as well. For the green, I used pesto, stream, willow, and bottle. And by now you've probably figured out that I was just kidding about my great care in applying the ink. I'll blend the inks via gravity by just letting the ink flow together, as well as using the felt. This is how the painting looks after the first layer of ink. Remember that our subject is safe under the layer of masking fluid. The next step is to adjust the lights and darks by following the reference photo. I'll lighten the sidewalk by adding cool perry along the rim of the grate and letting it flow down. More darks are needed, so I'll add eggplant to the foliage. While it looks like I'm just kind of throwing it on there, I really am paying a bit of attention to the reference photo to know where to put some darks. I'll use the cotton ball for texture and attempt to build the bushes into a believable mass of foliage. Now for the reveal. After waiting, and this is important, wait until the ink is dry, I pull off the masking fluid. And voila, there's a fountain and a pretty cool grate under there. The good news is that the painting is starting to look like something, but the less than good news is that we are far from finished. It's now time to begin to add details and to clean up from the masking fluid. So I'll begin with alcohol and the small brush. You'll see that I tap off the excess alcohol onto a felt square. I'll add details into the bushes and try to follow the lighting pattern of the reference photo. To lighten and add texture to the upper portion of the painting, I used alcohol in the mister and continued to work in this area. A bit of sunshine yellow will highlight and complement the eggplant. To add detail to the fountain, I'll begin with espresso for the darks. I dispensed a bit into the weld palette, which will evaporate and thicken over time. I follow the lines from the drawing and am guided by the photo when adding the darks. This is the painting part of the process and requires a bit of thought and a lot of patience. I work my way around the fountain and start to bring out the sculptural qualities of the design. Every few minutes I'll stop and look over the composition. Despite the left side being completely in shadow, I decided to give a suggestion of it, which will augment the sense of mass. I return to modeling the shape of the fountain. This time I'll use a paler dark like pebble. The faucet is a particular focal area, so extra attention to detail is necessary. To add texture to the sidewalk, I use felt with the alcohol. As you've probably noticed, this piece is very much about differences in texture, and is a great example of the array of techniques that I teach in the beginning class. Just within this sidewalk, I use the felt, the brush and alcohol, and the cotton swab to lighten areas and bring out the rough surface. It's time to step back and look. It's coming together, but a bit more cleanup and a little aging is necessary for the grate. I'll use the brush for most of the work, but add a few sharper details with the sepia pen. For the next few steps, I'll go back and forth between lightening with alcohol and further defining the design. I brush on a bit of caramel to the front of the fountain, and use the cotton swab to bring out the texture of the verdigris surface. There's still more detail work, both to the fountain and to the background around it. Here's where the painting is now, getting closer. While the reference photo is a narrow vertical, I want to see how close my picture is to 8 by 10. I'll place a mat on it, and I see that it is pretty close, so I'll just fill in the missing bushes. I decided to add in the tiny leaves at the base of the fountain. I decided to skip the straw. A few more finishing touches, some yellow accents, a tiny bit of white pen, and my signature.